welcome to the Art of Being Human. Today I'm going to start off by telling you what stress does to your body. Now you need to realize that when people have symptoms, they're looking for symptom relief. They're not looking at causative factors, although they need to look at causative factors to find out what caused the symptoms to begin with. So what happens is they have panic, they have depression, they have anxiety, which is not quite as bad as panic, but it's uncomfortable. Different symptoms that they have: their heart is racing, they have a trouble breathing, they're scared to death, they don't want to go into a store, they're afraid they're going to scream. That is one of the symptoms, by the way, feeling that you're going to scream when you're in with people in any kind of a social situation, such as going into a grocery store. And it's very difficult to handle those symptoms on your own. So the first thing that people are thinking about when they have symptoms is, how do you get rid of the symptoms? Now, what you need to do is look at what caused them to begin with to get real symptom relief. If you are just going to mask the symptoms with medication so you don't feel those symptoms, you can get away with that, but it's going to keep returning. You know, if you realize that when you're angry, it's caused by anxiety, then you can do something about it, because anxiety and anger really are connected together, and we'll be getting into that. But if you have like an infection, you can take antibiotics and you can get rid of the infection. And then if you don't know what caused the infection to begin with, then maybe the infection's going to come back. So you don't want to have to keep treating symptoms that keep coming back all the time. What you need to do is to find out what caused the symptoms to begin with, eliminate that, and then you won't continue to have the symptoms. Now, of course, that requires therapy, that requires hard work. If anybody thinks that therapy is just sitting in a chair and chatting to a therapist like a social situation, it may look a little like that, but a lot of hard mental work is going on. And if you don't put that kind of work into it, you're not going to be able to get the results that you want. Now, some people, when they see a therapist, the only thing that you can do is to give them symptom relief, and that's usually in the form of medication. But it can be in terms of relaxation, exercises, feedback, and all of that. There are other things that you can do as well. But some people are not capable or do not want to dig into the past, and so therefore they prefer just symptom relief, and that's a possibility. But it means if they don't get back into what caused the symptoms to begin with, the symptoms will keep occurring over and over again. So when you see a person and they're under a lot of stress, sometimes it's helpful to know what's actually going on in the body. How does the stress affect your body? Because it will affect every single organ system that you have. And so that's what I want to get into on this segment. Then after that, probably the next segment, what we'll do is we're going to talk about how people medicate themselves, self-medication, what people do in order to stop symptoms. Instead of going in for therapy, instead of working on it, they just want to have a way to get rid of the symptoms. I understand the feeling. I understand that it can be horrible and you need that. But people medicate themselves in different kinds of ways: smoking, alcoholism, drug use. And what does that do to the body? You know, so I want to make those comparisons, and I think it will help you if you're able to pinpoint what organs in your body are most affected by stress, and what you do to pre-medicate and medicate yourself, self-medicate, so that you don't have those symptoms and you relieve those symptoms. It's kind of like a pattern. And then we'll go on from there. There's a lot more to discuss, but let's discuss the chronic stress and what it does and how it affects your health. It affects, as I said before, every organ in the body. So let's get started with the heart. What does constant stress do to your heart? Well, the heart's going to speed up, the blood pressure is going to increase, and your heart is going to be pounding, and it seems like it's ready to burst. You might even be able, if you lay down, to hear it pound, 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 and you might have irregular heartbeats. This is not, on a long-term basis, good for your heart. at all. But this is what happens if the heart is taking the stress. Now, I need to remind you also that certain people, their stress level is such that certain parts of their body are affected, maybe not so much all of them, but certain organ systems seem to be more affected than others, depending upon who you are and where you're the most vulnerable and where the stress happens to hit. But that would be the heart. Now, the lungs. If you have a problem, you can, in a panic, not be able to breathe well, and so you're gasping for air. It seems like you can't get enough air. It seems like you can't breathe enough, and that's also a symptom of great stress. And if you breathe fast, what happens is that you get sometimes too much oxygen, and that drops your carbon dioxide in the blood, and it makes your heart work even harder. The heart and the lungs, they kind of work together. And so therefore, you have to be careful not to have too much stress. You have to have a way of relaxing and not taking your life so seriously. And the faster you breathe, the more lightheaded you feel. And you feel, as a result of that, numbing and tingling in your hands and feet. So let me go through this cycle again. If your stress is related to your lungs, you're going to start gasping for air. You're going to feel like you can't breathe. That's a sign of panic. It's a sign of anxiety. And then if you breathe harder and harder, you actually will get more oxygen than what you need. And that's going to drop the carbon dioxide level in your blood, and it's going to make your heart beat even harder and faster. So therefore, you kind of take a deep breath and then just kind of relax and then see if you can calm things down a little just for symptom relief. The heart and the lungs are working together. Well, what about the stomach? A lot of people have stomach trouble, a lot of trouble. And what happens with your stomach is that it's going to become agitated because of the stress. And now, you have those convolutions, you have those contractions in the stomach that's for digestion. You're going to have acid in your stomach. It's going to increase. So here's what happens to the stomach. You can get ulcers. You can get irritable bowel syndrome, indigestion, acid reflux, constipation, nausea, and diarrhea. Whatever affects your stomach a lot of times also affects your bowels. And so you'll be in certain bowel distress, and you'll be constipated, or you'll have cramping, and you won't feel good. And then you'll get nausea because the bowels are distressed. You get nausea because your stomach gets distressed also. There are a whole host of digestive illnesses that people have. I want to mention one thing about ulcer. The saying is, it's not what you eat, it's what eats you. But stress is not the only thing that causes you to have an ulcer. A lot of ulcers are caused by bacteria that get into the stomach, and it causes an ulcer, and it doesn't have anything to do with stress. But if you are under stress, a lot of stress, and your stomach is getting the brunt of that, you can also get an ulcer from that. So there's more than one way to get an ulcer. So let me read those symptoms again. Ulcers, irritable bowel syndrome, and that's a very uncomfortable system where you have to go to the bathroom a lot. Indigestion, acid reflux, constipation, nausea, and diarrhea. It's like the whole digestive system is affected. If stress is on your digestive system, everything is affected in the digestive system. Remember, the body is a whole. The body is a whole unit, and you can't subdivide and say, well, this I have trouble with, this I don't. It may be true that stress levels affect one section of your body more than another. Certain people have that. But your body is all intertwined, and what affects one eventually does affect the other, and your whole body is under distress. I know I've heard people say, if my stomach is upset, my whole body is upset. If my feet hurt, my whole body hurts, because everything is kind of related to everything else. We are one whole being. And the purpose of trying to achieve homeostasis, which is a term that I use occasionally, homeostasis is when everything is working together. like it should be. One is working, another is responsive to what one is doing. And that's the way it is. If you're a female and it's time for your cycle to begin, then your ovaries send out a signal. Your pituitary gland responds to that signal. And they work together. And so that in a normal, healthy person, the organ systems do work together. If you don't have enough sugar in your blood, your liver will provide it, even if you're not eating enough food. Sometimes the liver will just provide the sugar that you need if you're diabetic. Unfortunately, the liver does not know when to stop. Where if you had a pancreas, a normal pancreas, it would stop it. But there's an interchange between all of the organs in the body. They work together, and one tends to affect the other. Well, what about muscles? Some people manifest stress in a certain area of the body, such as their face, their neck, their back, and the muscles contract. And what you get from that is pain. Some people clench their fists. Some people clench their teeth. And it's all like muscle spasms due to stress. And some people grind their teeth when they're sleeping. They're still manifesting that stress. There's still contractions of the muscles. And that can lead to kind of misalignment of the back, where you need to have your back worked on. It can be just muscle pain. And there's all kinds of medications that you can buy over the counter to take care of muscle pain, a salve or a cream that you put on, muscle rubs and stuff like that. But that can be due to stress. Now, how about the skin? What will happen to the skin is that it's going to break out, and you're going to get rashes, and you're going to get hives, psoriasis, and acne. When I was teaching in high school, I was asked to do a concert because I was always into woodwinds, and I said, okay, I'll do a concert, and I got all prepared for the concert. And the day that I woke up, I had these bulging things all over my hands and my wrists. I could barely move. I didn't have any pain. But they were just like an outbreak of something on my skin. And it turned out I had broken out with a real bad case of hives. I never had hives before. I didn't even know what hives were. But there they were, and I could barely move my hands because, for fingering instruments, you have to move your hands. And I could barely move my hands, and it didn't hurt, but I knew this was really odd. But I went through and I did the concert, and I did fine. And the thing is, I never felt nervous. So I think what happened in that particular instance, and I'm not a nervous performer anyway, usually I do solos and I don't think anything of it, I just do them and it's not a problem. But what happened is I think that I was under stress for this because I hadn't done this. This is before a high school audience and it's before a lot of other people as well. And I didn't feel any panic, but my body felt it. And what I did was I erupted in all of these hives. And then I finally went to the doctor after the concert was over, and she told me what they were, and she gave me a cream for them, and gradually they settled down. I haven't had them since. So sometimes when you feel a stress, then something else is going to react. Your body feels the stress, but your body system will react to the stress instead of you feeling the personal nervousness. And I thought to myself at the time, if this prevents me from being nervous, then maybe I should have hives more often. I was joking to myself at the time because nobody wants to have hives like that. But they went away, and that was the end of it. Now, I can remember when somebody gave me a rare saxophone, and only about 6 keys worked. And I went to the pastor and I said, I have this new instrument, but it's very rare. He says, do a solo tonight. And so I did the solo, and the thing that happened to me was I knew that if something went wrong, I went before the people who were in the congregation. I said, this is a new saxophone for me. It's very rare. They don't make them anymore. They don't even make mouthpieces for them anymore. You can't buy a mouthpiece for them. You have to use a mouthpiece from another instrument, but it will work if you do that. And only 6 keys work. So I played the solo. It never missed a beat. The tone was wonderful. And the thing is, I was totally relaxed. No hives, no nothing. I was totally relaxed. And I thought to myself, if something goes wrong and I can't reach a note or I can't play a note or something goes wrong, they're going to blame the instrument. They're not going to blame me. So I could kind of relax and not worry about giving a perfect performance, because it would be the instrument's fault if I didn't do a perfect solo. Well, I did a perfect solo. It never missed a beat, and it was a beautiful song, a beautiful piece, difficult piece to play, and the instrument was just terrific. After that, I never was nervous again. And I wasn't nervous a lot anyway. That never has been my problem. But I was never nervous again. It just never dawned on me that I should be. The audience was kind of cheering the instrument along. You can do it, you can do it. And when you go to a concert, you know, you really are trying to kind of encourage the person who's doing a solo if they're nervous. You feel badly for them because you're out to support them. You're not out to hinder them. You're not out to make fun of them or anything like that. Well, this instrument I had completely restored. It's worth thousands of dollars. It plays beautifully. Once in a while I've had it in here, and but because I knew I could relax and do it, even if the instrument failed, it didn't fail, but even if it did, I would not take personal responsibility in terms of I failed. It would be because the instrument just plain wasn't working right. It cost a few hundred to get it restored, but it was well worth it. It's a very, very rare instrument, very heavy too. But so you see, nerves can affect you in different ways. If you're nervous, you can have an organ system that responds. My skin responded to that, even though I didn't feel the nervousness. Now, the idea is for people who are nervous and they're frightened to death, then they do want to have relief from that symptom, and they'll do what they have to have relief. Now, I have a friend of mine who is on Broadway, and she's done a lot of plays on Broadway, and she tells about one of her friends who is a well-known person, who is an actress, and before she goes on stage, she is so nervous, she just sits and holds her head because she's so panicked and she's so afraid. Afraid of what? Afraid of making a mistake, afraid of not remembering her lines, whatever it is. And so what she does is that she sits there and maybe she hums and she just kind of holds her head. And then when it gets to the point where she's on stage, all the nervousness disappears and she's fine. She goes through her part. She does a magnificent job. It's those hours before that she goes on that she's terrified. Well, that's stage fright. It's also something called anticipatory fear. When you anticipate something that's absolutely coming up and you anticipate it, but you're afraid of it because you're afraid something's going to fail or you're going to make a mistake. Or if you go to a doctor and you're afraid of going because you're afraid of what the diagnosis is going to be. You know, you can get terribly afraid. And then when you're there, you're not afraid anymore because it's no longer anticipatory. You're actually in the event. And if you're in the event, you're not anticipating it. You're there. And anticipatory anxiety tends to fade away when that happens. Well, anyway, that's my story about the skin. Now, what about the immune system? The immune system will wear down, and then it doesn't work right. It's easier for you to catch an illness. If you're under stress, your immune system is under stress, and it's on high alert. It's like your body is on high alert, and you can wear down the immune system, and then it does not work. And eventually, it doesn't do what it's supposed to do, and it's much easier for you to become ill because you don't have the resistance that you normally would have. What about your reproductive system? Well, if for a woman, it can become painful monthly cycles, and there are issues of reproduction and being able to get pregnant and being able to have children. Sometimes the system shuts down and you can't. And with men, it's more a problem of impotence. They shut down too, in a way. And so that's what stress will do to the reproductive system. What about weight? Now, the stress hormone, there are a couple of stress hormones, but one of them is cortisol. And if you're under stress, cortisol increases the blood sugar levels and it suppresses the immune system. So your body is in trouble. The blood sugar is going to go up too high, but the immune system is not going to work right either. And you may feel that you have more energy, but it's not going to, your body is not going to react well. Sometimes when you are really alert and you're on high alert because of your stress level, then you feel like you've got all kinds of energy, but it's short-lived. And then your body doesn't respond well when something else occurs. It just can't. So you're apt to put on extra weight, and you're apt to have higher blood pressure, and you're apt to have more heart trouble if you have too much cortisol in your system. And part of the stress relief is to reduce that cortisol. What about your head? You're going to get chronic migraines. You're going to get all different kinds of cluster headaches. There's all kinds of headaches you can have. Now, the responses that you have are okay and help you in the short run. They're normal and they help you in the short run, although they may be uncomfortable. But on a long-term basis, it's not good. Chronic stress calls you to produce adrenaline. And adrenaline makes you feel shaky and weak. And the cortisol gives you weight gain and increases your fat production. So between the adrenaline, which makes you too hyper, and the cortisol, which is always a problem if you have too much in your system, you can have a real problem if you have your stress level that's too high, especially if you have it day after day after day. You know, some people can remember when they first started getting stressed. Other people can't. It kind of came upon them. But some people know exactly what happened when they had their first panic attack, how it came out of the blue, how they didn't know where it came from, how they started crying and yelling and screaming, how they were so scared they wouldn't go out of the house, and then since that time they don't go out of the house because they're afraid it's going to happen again. It's a circular pattern. You know, the worse you feel, the more anxious you become. But the more anxious you become, the worse you feel. It's like a circular pattern. What comes first, the chicken or the egg? Sometimes it's hard to know. Now, what happens to your stomach? If you're in distress, you're going to get nauseous when you get nervous. You're going to have acid reflux. All kinds of things are going to happen to you, but it happens to the rest of you too. You are, as I said before, a total unit. You are a whole person. And to subdivide and say, well, this happens here and I'm okay other places, that usually doesn't occur. Usually things affect each other, and the body organs affect each other organ, so you act as a total unit. And if you are under distress, then eventually the whole body's going to know it and it's going to feel it, because it's going to react to, all the organ systems will react with each other. So it's important when you have that high stress level that somehow it doesn't continue over long periods of time. And it's also important for you to remember what systems in your body are affected the most. It may be the systems in your body that are the weakest. That would not be surprising that they take it harder than other body systems take it. But you have to realize that you are a person who has a total system, and that what you have to do is to reduce the stress level. And going through all of this, you may be able to pinpoint which one part of your body is more receptive to the stress and more agonized by the stress than other parts of the body. And this will help you when you go to go to a doctor or go to a counselor for help. This is what I'm suffering from the most, and this always comes from the stress that I'm suffering. So I'm going to close it here. We'll continue with this next time. Please join me then.